I was let go during an awards ceremony after closing a $200 million deal. I didn't react, just smiled and walked out. The next day, the system collapsed. $200 million vanished. I-29F had just closed the biggest deal in our company's history when they decided to fire me. Right there, in front of everyone, during what was supposed to be my moment of triumph. The quarterly awards ceremony was in full swing. Our CEO was on stage, praising the record-breaking quarter we'd just had. The entire sales floor was packed, everyone dressed up, champagne glasses in hand. I was sitting in the front row, still buzzing from the adrenaline of finally getting the signature on the Morrison Industries contract that morning. $200 million. The kind of deal that changes everything. My manager had pulled me aside just before the ceremony started. She told me they needed to speak with me privately after the awards. Something about restructuring, she said. Budget cuts. I felt my stomach drop, but I pushed the feeling away. Not today. Not after what I'd just accomplished. The CEO called my name from the stage. The Morrison deal. Record-breaking performance. The crowd erupted in applause as I walked up to receive the crystal trophy. I smiled, shook hands, posed for photos. The weight of the award felt good in my hands. That's when my manager appeared beside me on stage. She whispered something to the CEO, who nodded grimly. He took the microphone again and announced that due to recent organizational changes, my position was being eliminated effective immediately. The room went silent. 200 people staring at me, watching my career implode in real time. I could have screamed, could have thrown the trophy, could have demanded answers in front of everyone. Instead, I smiled wider, handed the award back to the CEO, and told him it had been a pleasure working with everyone. I walked off that stage with my head high, grabbed my purse from my desk, and left the building. The security guard at the front desk looked confused as I handed over my badge. He asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. I told him I was perfect, thanked him for everything, and walked out into the parking garage. Only then, sitting in my car, did I let myself feel the rage. They had used me, waited until I delivered their golden goose, then tossed me aside like garbage. The Morrison deal had been my baby for 8 months. I'd cultivated that relationship, navigated their complex approval process, handled every objection, every delay, every last-minute change. And now they'd get all the credit and commission while I got nothing. But they'd made one crucial mistake. The Morrison contract wasn't just about money. It was about integration. Their entire supply chain management system was going to merge with ours through a custom software bridge I'd helped design. The technical specifications, the access protocols, the security keys. I'd been involved in every step because I was the only one who understood both companies' needs well enough to make it work. I drove home and opened my laptop. The integration was scheduled to go live at midnight. In 6 hours, Morrison's systems would connect to ours, and that $200 million would start flowing. But first, I had some modifications to make. I wasn't going to steal anything. I wasn't going to sabotage their actual business operations. I was simply going to ensure that the integration failed spectacularly, and that when it did, they'd have no way to fix it quickly. The beauty of complex software systems is that they're only as strong as their weakest link. And I had built several very weak links into this one, hidden so deep in the code that it would take their IT team weeks to find them. Recursive loops that would trigger under specific conditions. Memory leaks that would compound over time. Database queries that would lock up under heavy load. I spent the evening crafting my masterpiece. Every line of code was a small act of revenge, carefully disguised as legitimate functionality. When Morrison's systems tried to sync with ours at midnight, they'd find themselves in digital quicksand. My phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from colleagues who'd been at the ceremony, asking what happened, expressing shock and sympathy. I ignored them all. I had work to do. At 11:47 p.m., I uploaded my final modifications to the integration server. The changes were subtle enough that they'd pass the automated testing protocols, but devastating enough to bring the entire system to its knees once real data started flowing. I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. Update 1. The first call came at 2:17 a.m. My former manager, panic in her voice, asking if I could come in to help with a technical issue. The Morrison integration had failed catastrophically. Their systems were locked up, ours were throwing error messages, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. I told her I was no longer an employee and couldn't help with company business. She begged, offered to pay me as a consultant, promised they'd reconsider my termination if I could fix this. I hung up. By morning, the situation had escalated beyond anyone's worst nightmares. Morrison's entire supply chain had ground to a halt. Their manufacturing plants couldn't access inventory data. Their distribution centers couldn't process shipments. Their financial systems couldn't track transactions. And our company was contractually liable for every minute of downtime. The CEO called me personally at 7 a.m. He was trying to sound calm, professional, but I could hear the desperation underneath. He explained that they were facing potential lawsuits, that Morrison was threatening to cancel the contract entirely, that the company's reputation was on the line. He offered me my job back. Double salary. Stock options. Whatever I wanted. I told him I'd think about it and hung up. The local news picked up the story by noon. Tech integration disaster costs local company millions. The reporter interviewed Morrison's CEO, who looked haggard and furious. He talked about breach of contract, about considering legal action, about the massive financial losses his company was experiencing every hour the systems remained down. My former colleagues were calling constantly now. The entire IT department was working around the clock, but they couldn't even identify the source of the problems, let alone fix them. The integration code was too complex, too interwoven with both companies' core systems. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, feeling a satisfaction I'd never experienced before. They'd thrown me away like I was nothing. Now they were learning exactly what I was worth. Update 2. By day 3, the situation had become a full-blown crisis. Morrison had officially suspended the contract and was demanding immediate resolution or they'd pursue legal action for damages. Industry analysts were calling it one of the worst tech integration failures in recent memory. Our company's stock price had dropped 30%. The CEO was fielding calls from angry investors. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. That's when they sent their lawyer to my apartment. He was a sharp-dressed man in his 50s who introduced himself as the company's general counsel. He sat in my living room and explained very carefully that they knew I had sabotaged the integration. They had digital forensics experts analyzing the code, and it was only a matter of time before they could prove what I'd done. He offered me a choice. Come back and fix the system, and they'd forget this ever happened. Refuse, and they'd pursue criminal charges for corporate sabotage and theft of trade secrets. I listened to his entire speech, nodding thoughtfully. Then I asked him if he'd like some coffee. While I was in the kitchen, I called my own lawyer, one I'd retained the day after my termination. She'd been expecting this conversation. When I returned with the coffee, I had some information to share with the company's counsel. First, I documented everything about my termination, including the suspicious timing and the lack of proper severance. Second, I'd recorded several conversations with colleagues who'd admitted that my firing was politically motivated, not performance-based. Third, I had emails proving that senior management had planned to take credit for the Morrison deal while pushing me out. Most importantly, I had a detailed analysis of the integration code showing that while complex, everything I'd written was technically within the scope of my original job responsibilities. The system failures weren't due to sabotage. They were due to the company's decision to proceed with a complex integration without the person who designed it. The lawyer's confident demeanor cracked. He asked what I wanted. I told him I wanted my job back, with a promotion to Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. I wanted a 3-year guaranteed contract with a substantial raise and full commission on the Morrison deal. I wanted a public apology from the CEO for the mishandling of my termination. And I wanted it all in writing by end of business today, or I'd be happy to discuss the situation with Morrison's legal team, who I was sure would be very interested in learning about the internal politics that had led to their current predicament. He left without finishing his coffee. Update 3. The call came at 4:47 p.m. The CEO himself, sounding like a man who'd aged 10 years in 4 days. They accepted my terms. All of them. I told him I'd need the weekend to consider their offer. Monday morning, I walked back into the office wearing my best suit and carrying a new briefcase. The security guard who'd watched me leave in disgrace 4 days earlier now stood up and welcomed me back with obvious relief. The entire floor went quiet as I walked to my new corner office, the one that had belonged to my former manager, who had been reassigned to a different department. I set down my briefcase, booted up my computer, and got to work. It took me exactly 47 minutes to fix the integration. The Morrison systems came back online like nothing had ever happened. Data flowed seamlessly between the companies. The $200 million deal was back on track. My phone started ringing immediately. Morrison's CTO, thanking me personally for resolving the crisis. Industry contacts, congratulating me on the successful integration. Headhunters, offering me positions at competing firms. But the most satisfying call came from Morrison's CEO. He told me he'd been impressed by my professionalism throughout the crisis, and that his company was interested in expanding their partnership with us. There were additional projects on the horizon, potentially worth another $300 million over the next 2 years. He wanted to work with me directly. I scheduled a meeting for the following week. That afternoon, the CEO held an all-hands meeting to announce the successful resolution of the integration crisis. He praised the IT team's hard work, thanked everyone for their patience, and introduced me as the new Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. The applause was polite but uncertain. Everyone knew what had really happened, even if they couldn't prove it. After the meeting, several colleagues approached me. Some offered congratulations on my promotion. Others asked how I'd managed to fix the integration so quickly when the entire IT department had been stumped. I smiled and told them it was just a matter of understanding the system architecture. My former manager, now my subordinate, stopped by my office before leaving that day. She looked tired, defeated. She asked if we could put the past behind us and work together professionally. I told her that sounded like an excellent idea. As I sat in my new office that evening, looking out at the city lights, I reflected on what I'd learned. Companies like to talk about loyalty, about being a family, about shared success. But when push comes to shove, they'll sacrifice anyone for the bottom line. The difference is, some of us are harder to sacrifice than others. The Morrison deal officially closed the following month. My commission check was substantial enough to put a down payment on a house in the hills. The CEO personally delivered it, along with a handwritten note thanking me for my exceptional dedication to the company's success. I framed the note and hung it on my office wall, right next to my new business cards. 6 months later, Morrison signed the additional $300 million expansion deal. This time, there was no awards ceremony. Just a quiet signing in the conference room, followed by a celebration dinner at the city's most expensive restaurant. I sat at the head of the table, watching my colleagues toast our success, and smiled. They'd learned their lesson about underestimating me. Some lessons are worth $200 million, but the most valuable lesson wasn't about money or revenge. It was about knowing your worth and making sure others know it too. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to prove you're the only one who knows how to build it.